JL, you said something that I thought was pretty profound, and we might talk about Chautauquas a little bit later, but we were talking about work, and you said work is close to the human soul, which I think is true. We all need meaningful work. I can't imagine retiring and sitting on the couch and eating Cheetos and watching reruns all day. Honestly, I'd rather be dead than do something like that. That would just throw me into depression. So, what does retirement look like to you, and how do you reconcile that with what the internet retirement police might tell you? Hey, you're retired. You're not supposed to be working. You're not supposed to be writing this book. Why are you doing this? I realize I'm all over the place there, but maybe you can form my thoughts into something more cohesive.
Speaking of being all over the place, one of the things that popped into my head while you were saying that, because I think you're right, is probably one of the things that makes solitary confinement so psychologically abusive is you're not sitting on a beach, but you are sitting with nothing to do. And that, I'm not a psychologist, but evidently that is one of the most difficult things for a human being to deal with, is having nothing to do. I'm not a fan of the acronym FIRE, or more correctly, I am. I think it's a very cool acronym because FIRE is a cool word, and FIRE, of course, stands for Financial Independence, Retire Early. But you will never find it in my writings. I use just the acronym FI. It's not nearly as cool as the word FIRE, but it takes off that retire early part, because for me, it's never been about retiring. In fact, we talked about my guest post on Mr. Money Mustache way back in 2012, and that was the title of it, is Never Been About Retirement. Because I liked my job. I liked my career. I enjoyed it. I never had that concept in my head. In fact, I didn't hear that concept or come across it until after I started my blog. I had heard the concept of having FU money, and I found that in a book by James Clavell, Noble House, in the 70s, and there's a character in there, and her stated goal is to accumulate $10 million, and that will be her FU money. FU money meaning that she could do anything she wanted. So I guess the same thing as FI. But to me, it was just having enough money that I could step away from jobs when I wanted to and take mini sabbaticals, which is how I spent my career, because I loved working. I just didn't want to have to do it all the time. And I had a tendency, by the way, when I was working, to be kind of a workaholic. I really threw myself into it. And that's just, I'm not saying that's a good way to be or a bad way to be. It's just kind of the way I am. But it's not a long-term way to be. You burn yourself out. And so it would have been horrible if I had never been able to step away and recharge my batteries. But that's what the FU money provided me. So for me, it's never been about retirement. And I think, as you mentioned, you and Mr. Money Mustache, and I think everybody I've ever met in this community, whether they have blogs or they don't, who has hit financial independence and who has left their traditional employment, I don't know a single one who hasn't gone on to do other things. And most often those other things throw off money. Even if they don't need the money and they're not intending to. And so I think that the retire early part, as you alluded to, confuses a lot of people outside the financial independent movement, makes them resistant to it, because they look at people like you, and for that extension, I guess maybe not so much me because I'm an old guy, but they look at young people like you and Mr. Money Mustache, and they say, well, these guys aren't retired. They just quit one job and went on to do other kinds of work. That's legitimate in a sense, but that's really not the point. Your point wasn't, I'm assuming, to accumulate this portfolio so you never have to work again. It was just gives you more options as to how to work. I've met people, by the way, who've reached financial independence, that they're at that number, who've said to me, I love my job. I don't want to quit my job. Do I have to quit my job? I'm like, no, you don't have to quit. You know, the whole point of being financially independent is you can do whatever you want to do. And if that means continuing to do what you're doing now, that's wonderful. It just gives you options. It gives you freedom. It's buying your freedom. So that's a long-winded answer as to why I don't use, well, I think the FIRE acronym is really cool. I think it also, it just becomes kind of a quagmire with those last two letters. So I choose not to use it. And there you go. Problem solved.
Sure.